The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good afternoon. Showing paused PowerPoint. Please play. Becky, oh, there it goes. Can you see my screen, Becky?
I can see it.
Good. Well, good afternoon. This is Lori Fox. I am the chair of the executive committee of SIGUX, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today. Before I turn it over to our presenter, I have just a little bit of information for you. First of all, our housekeeping reminders. Everyone is muted. The session is being recorded and it will be available next week on our SIGUX YouTube channel. You can ask a question in the questions area. And Becky, are you okay if we interrupt you during your presentation, or you want to hold questions till the end?
I can go either way. I think it's usually a little bit tidier to hold them until the end because
Okay.
we're going to cover a fairly limited scope of information here. So we'll make sure that your question is something that's actually within what we're talking about.
Good. So we'll
let's
hold
try to do
questions
that.
until the end. And then at the end, there'll be an opportunity. If you're interested, you can be unmuted and use your microphone. Our first SIGUX virtual conference will be November 10th. And actually, if you go to our website, you'll see an updated schedule. The information has been updated on our website. We're looking forward to that. Also, our SIGUX annual conference has been moved to March 2021, still in San Diego, California. Our call for proposals is, I believe, still open. So we're looking forward to getting together in San Diego in the spring.
Hey, Lori, are we
Yes.
supposed to be seeing you move through the slides here?
Did
Because
it
I'm only
pause
seeing,
again?
yeah, I'm only seeing your paused PowerPoint on the title slide.
Okay, hold on, please.
I'm still seeing your lovely face on the webcam.
Well, that's nice. Okay, I don't understand why it's pausing.
Okay, something just changed. Maybe it's loading.
As soon as I try to present, it pauses again.
Oh,
Yeah.
now we have a white screen. There we go. Webinar reminders.
So you see, it's funny, it won't display if I put it in presentation mode. Okay, so have you ever walked into a classroom and seen someone presenting without putting it in present mode? That's what we're going to do. Okay, so here we are with information about the SIGUX annual conference. Next, I want to talk about our book club. I've been reading this book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's a story. I think they actually refer to it as a leadership fable, and I've really been enjoying it. So I encourage you to pick up a copy from the library, or maybe you want to buy it for your Kindle. It's a great book. We will have a book club discussion at the end of July. We give ourselves 2 weeks or 2 months to read a book now. Our September book is Creative Trespassing: How to Put the Spark and Joy Back into Your Work and Life. I'm thrilled with the timing of these books because in September, who knows what things are going to look like, but I bet we're going to need some spark and joy. So please join us for our book club. It's a lot of fun. We are accepting nominations for the Penny Crate Award for Distinguished Service and Hall of Fame Awards. You can find information about those on our website, as well as our Communication Awards. Nominations for the Communication Awards are due in mid-October. The awards are judged by last year's winners, and one fantastic aspect of this program is whether you win or not, you get great feedback from your colleagues at other universities about projects that you've worked on and materials you've created. So what a great opportunity to get feedback for the work that you've done. We have 2 upcoming webinars. In July, we've got Cook 'em Like Gumbo with Mo Nishiyama. And it's not quite pinned down what date in August yet, but Christy Lenz is going to be talking about communication skills and teaming. Definitely some great membership benefits for SIGUX, including conference discounts, access to the ACM Digital Library, the SIGUX mentoring program. So I encourage you to join SIGUX. And you can stay in touch with us through many different ways, including our email listserv, Facebook community, Twitter, and Slack. So, Becky, I'm going to change presenter to you and mute myself so you can't hear my dog barking.
Thank you, Lori.
And
let me go ahead. Oh, this is interesting. It's telling me that GoToMeeting will not be allowed to record my screen until it's quit. Well, give me just a moment here.
Are you on a Mac?
I am.
That's a new permission thing. I noticed that with my other conference too.
Hey, I'll just a moment here. I'll be right back.
Okay. While we're waiting, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to hear some updates on Becky's presentation that she shared with us at SIGUX last year. How's it looking, Becky?
Well, let's see here. I see SIGUX. So how do I get to my screen share?
Let me make you presenter again.
There we go. Show my screen. Okay. All right. Connected to GoToWebinar. There we are.
All right. And now I'm going to mute myself.
All right. Well, Lori, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Becky Lineberry. I'm an IT service management analyst with Washington University in St. Louis. My specialty areas of practice are in knowledge management and reporting and analytics. So the presentation I'm going to do today is based off a presentation I did at SIGUX 2019 that was called Solve and Evolve, and that was in a pretty in-depth look at knowledge-centered service, which is a methodology for integrating knowledge management into workflows. For the purposes of today's webinar, I wanted to dig just a little bit deeper into two specific aspects of knowledge-centered service. If you were in my session in New Orleans, you may recall that it got pretty crowded. Crowded in terms of information. I ended up talking pretty much up until the final end of the session, and there wasn't a lot of time for Q&A. So I decided that today we would work on just specifically zooming in on team and process integration in knowledge management. These are two aspects of this work that I've really found have been absolutely crucial to the success of growing the program at Washington University. And as I continue to do this work and expand what we're doing, it really all comes back to the culture of the workplace. And culture is driven by your team. It's your people, it's your resources that are doing the work. And process integration is how you get that team to do this work in addition to everything else that they're already asked to do. So let's take a bit of a look at that today. So what do we mean? Knowledge management. Knowledge management as a discipline is a thing that actually dates back kind of into the 1980s, as the global economy started looking at workplace focuses around the world instead of just local offices, and they realized they need to be able to share information among diverse groups and people that are scattered all over the place. And how do we do that? So it becomes this discipline that's an integrated approach to identifying, capturing, evaluating, retrieving, and sharing all of an enterprise's information assets. It puts them all together into something nice and tidy. And so those assets, what do we mean? Like databases, documents, policies, procedures, and the thing that a lot of people miss, which is previously uncaptured expertise and experience in individual workers. This is a pretty exhaustive definition. It comes from the Gartner Group, but it's also one that I think really captures the intent of knowledge management, what we mean when we're talking about this practice, what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So that's been around, that definition, since around the mid-90s, and it's pretty much the accepted definition and scope of knowledge management. Knowledge-centered service is a methodology for making knowledge management part of your everyday workflows. It's a framework for making knowledge part of that daily work that you do in IT. You're solving problems, you're completing tasks, and using knowledge to do it. You're centering your service delivery on the knowledge, the information that your team has. It connects your services with your information. And there are 4 principles for knowledge-centered service. The first principle is abundance. Basically, that means that the more that we learn, the more that we share. The more that we share, the more that we learn. So it's a happy little self-perpetuating cycle there. The more you can get people to be using the knowledge base to solve issues, the more they're going to be contributing to the knowledge base because they see the value of having it. And the more they contribute to the knowledge base, the more stuff is in there for other people to find value in the knowledge base and thus begin contributing it. So abundance is one of the key principles to follow. We also talk about creating value with knowledge-centered service. It's very easy in an IT world, in any customer service type world, to get caught up on working your task and dealing with the customer in front of you, or the customer who's on the phone or on that particular email, that one person, that one task that you need to do. And what we don't realize is that all of the work that we do is rarely only ever valuable to that one person. It has so much value to everybody who's ever going to have that same problem, that same break that needs to be fixed, that same request that needs to be fulfilled. And so when you start thinking outside of your individual task and your individual customer and look at the big picture, capturing knowledge allows you to create a better service environment for your future customers and for your colleagues who are serving those future customers. It's kind of a present you looking out for future you sort of situation. Your tasks really do have a big picture value. And as sort of an extension of that is demand-driven work. We look at knowledge as a byproduct of interaction. And what this means is that we don't just start dumping information into a knowledge base and call it good. What do the customers really need to know? What do our technicians really need to know to serve the customers? The best knowledge, the most useful knowledge in any knowledge base is stuff that comes out of questions, not out of what we think somebody needs to know, but what are the customers calling us and saying, hey, I've got a problem. Okay, so when you start creating knowledge off of incident tickets, you're really using the principle of demand-driven work. Somebody called and said, this is broken. We have steps to fix it. We've captured those, and that knowledge was driven by demand. And this is an important thing to me because I like to track information in our knowledge base to see how often we use it. If stuff isn't used over the course of about 2 years, well, is that necessary information in there, or is it just cluttering up search results? Are we launching new projects and putting all sorts of irrelevant information into the knowledge base that nobody ever uses? I had 200 articles about Epic sitting in my knowledge base that somebody threw in there because they thought maybe somebody will use them someday. Epic is supported by our teaching hospital. That's our partner in crime, if you will, our partner IT organization. We don't support Epic, but somebody might come into our KB looking for this stuff. So here's all these articles. They were never used. That was completely the antithesis to this particular principle of knowledge-centered service. And all of these first 3 pillars, the abundance, creating value, and demand-driven work, kind of add up to trust. Trust is a byproduct, I think, of doing those first 3 things right. It's pretty important. I inherited a process that had been sort of stymied by leadership constraints on the previous knowledge manager, and there were a lot of things about the knowledge process that were left to gather dust while the KM role went unfilled for 5 months, and people lost trust in the process. So educating people on these first 3 principles, helping to make sure that we are consistently implementing those principles, that's what drives people to ultimately trust the process, to ultimately want to engage in knowledge management. And it empowers them to participate in knowledge management and motivates them to be evangelizing it to their fellow staff members. So Washington University IT is an ITIL shop. We found a lot of wonderful synergies between ITIL and KCS. Those of you who are ITIL practitioners will find this as well. And it's not absolutely necessary for you to implement KCS for sure, but it does work out very nicely. Where ITIL is a framework that is pretty got these nice defined practices. And one of the big emphases that you'll get in any level of ITIL training is that you want to maintain and improve things. It's all about continuous improvement. And so for knowledge specifically, the line is to maintain and improve the effective, efficient, and convenient use of information and knowledge. And ITIL integrates knowledge management with other ITIL practices. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but I was surprised to learn in my ITIL Foundations training that knowledge is not a foundational ITIL practice. You go in there and they teach you more in depth about things like incident and change and I don't know, event management, whatnot, and not knowledge. And I was a little bit offended. I think knowledge is great. Everybody needs to know about knowledge. Why is this not foundational? Well, as far as ITIL goes, you've got to have these foundational practices in place, and knowledge is sort of this awesome overarching thing. And when we talk about process integration, I'll get more into it, that if you don't have this other stuff in place, you may not be ready to fully implement knowledge. So that's why it's not an ITIL foundational practice. And KCS fits really nicely in there with it because it's a methodology that works inside the ITIL framework. Axelos, the organization that oversees ITIL, did a really nice white paper that says that it complements the ITIL framework by providing a detailed methodology for knowledge management practice. And both KCS and ITIL recognize that knowledge is a key asset to the organization. So KCS has 2 specific practices called maintain and improve that have a direct analog in ITIL. But the cool thing about it is it's really flexible and adaptive to meet your organizational needs. It means it works great with ITIL, but it also means it works great with not ITIL. With whatever your organization needs, you can find information on KCS to make this model of service delivery fit what your organization needs you to accommodate, whether that's in terms of the resources that you have available, the hardware and the software that you have available to support these things, the communications, the staffing, whatever it is. So successful implementation of the KCS methodology is going to resonate in lots of either interconnected ITIL practices or just interconnected pieces of your IT service organization. How do we do that? We're going to look at the KCS double loop diagram. It's called solve and evolve. These are 2 interdependent and enabling loops, all right? So they belong together. You can't really have one without the other. The solve loop is the operational and tactical stuff. It's the day-to-day tasks of generating and refining useful articles and using knowledge to resolve problems. The evolve loop is strategic work that's informed by the metrics of the solve loop, and that in turn informs continuous improvement of the knowledge process. So as you continue to do better and better at solve, then your evolve takes things to the next level and improves your solve practice, which improves your evolve practice, and so on and so forth. Now you may wonder why you're seeing all of these Legos here. I think of Legos as a nice metaphor for the building blocks that we use in knowledge, for the way that we think about organizing things, the way that we think about piecing stuff together, and I have 4 little kids and they like Legos. So this is a little bit of a nod to the way that we start to think about information. So solve and evolve are 2 enabling loops. So the solve loop has 4 steps. You capture information. How do we get our knowledge from our brains into an article? There are a lot of ways to do this. Sometimes it's directly from record keeping that you're already doing. We capture a lot of knowledge directly from incident tickets. Sometimes we capture knowledge by creating articles from scratch. The structure is another step, and that's your design, your format, your usability, being consistent in the way that we serve up content to our users, because it's part of building that trust. It looks professional, feels professional, and it helps our users to understand what to expect from a knowledge article as well. Reuse is an important part of the solve loop. If we capture and structure these beautiful articles and nobody ever uses them, there's no value to that. And then improvement means we need to be constantly looking at what we're doing here. Are we reusing stuff? How can we continue to improve these things? Is there a review cycle for information to make sure that we are keeping our stuff up to date? Is it iterative? Is it reactive? And so on. So these are the transactional practices of knowledge management, the day-to-day, keeping the lights on kind of functions. And the work in the solve loop mainly falls to frontline personnel who work regularly with the knowledge base, okay? So at WashU, that's our service desk technicians who are mostly the ones who are capturing the knowledge that's used in articles. Through our online ticketing system, a technician can create a new article when a ticket is closed, and it's pre-populated with work notes from that ticket. Technicians are also the very frequent voices in our feedback process. They're the ones who reuse the articles when they're solving other incidents down the road and leaving us feedback on how we could improve them, saying, hey, this information's outdated, or I found a better way to solve this problem. So we have in our structure, we have knowledge coaches that are in charge of each category of knowledge articles. And those resources work with our technicians to get this work done and to continuously improve our solve loop. So I like to point out to people that the activity in the solve loop is really what can make or break your company's culture of knowledge management. There's a statement that I heard at the very first professional conference I ever went to, and I wish I could find the original source on this. I think it was some Forbes article forever ago, but it was culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I find that to be incredibly true, because the evolve loop that we're going to look at in a minute is all about the strategic stuff. But if you don't have the culture dialed in, the people doing the work, the team that we're talking about, your strategy is for naught. You know, you're shouting at the sky, right? So very important to understand the team and the people working within the solve loop and the activity that they're engaged in, because then we bring the evolve loop into it. We look there at things like content health. Okay, content health is how good is our information? Is it outdated? Is it inaccurate? Is it fake news, right? We need to do proactive review of things. It ties in really nicely with being able to improve articles. Process integration. This is a piece we're going to dive into a little bit deeper here in a minute. And it's one of those that seems like common sense, but knowledge doesn't just organically become part of the way that we provide IT services. This part of the evolve loop is about making knowledge work with processes and with workplace cultures that are already in place. Again, that culture eating strategy for breakfast, and we're seeing what it means here for the solve and evolve loops to be mutually enabling. There's a quote from KCS actually that says that the degree to which the knowledge worker consistently reuses, links, improves, and captures knowledge as they resolve issues is directly related to the degree to which the organization will realize the benefits of KCS. Maximizing and sustaining dramatic KCS benefits is fundamentally about people and their understanding, buy-in, beliefs, and behaviors. All of those people steps here have to buy in to their beliefs and their behaviors here as we integrate with the process. And further down there, performance assessment and leadership and communication. These are ones, it's it's really easy to get punitive when you're looking at numbers. And I always encourage people to keep a focus on the real value of your knowledge base. And I could do a whole nother presentation on how to measure value in knowledge. And what it really comes down to is setting a goal and telling people to write 87 knowledge articles a week is just going to get you 87 garbage knowledge articles a week. That's not how it's done. So not focusing on raw numbers and focusing instead on whether the content that we have is good. Is it being reused? If it's not being reused, we need to scrub it. We don't need to keep it there because we want to have 3,000 articles in our KB. 1,000 useful articles is way better than 5,000 that are just sitting there and not being used. So finding the right ways to do performance assessment is part of the evolve loop. And then finally, it comes up to leadership and communication, where your senior leaders need to do more than just buy into lip service to knowledge-centered service. They need to be a voice in both evangelizing the practice and holding other leaders accountable for adoption. So these are our value indicators, right? Consistent review and adherence to process steps is going to help us understand how well our knowledge is actually being used to meet our targets in the solve loop. So ultimately, what it all adds up to is we continue to improve our product. We continue to improve and enhance our customer experience. The better we do at these steps, continual improvement, the more our customer is going to trust and rely on our knowledge base for self-service. And self-service is ultimately the goal of knowledge management. It's being able to push information as close to the customer as possible. Instead of having to escalate things up to tier 3, if a tier 2 team can accomplish it, then that tier 2 team needs to have the information from tier 3 to get the work done. If it's something the customer can accomplish him or herself, they just need the information. So let's get it out there. We're really driving this toward making the best customer experience that minimizes the amount of times that they need to contact us at all and be bopped around from team to team to team within our IT organization. And all of that, of course, is improved by our knowledge reuse. So this is the Lego version of the solve and evolve double loop diagram. We're going to dive now into process integration. All right. The solve loop only evolves if what you build works with the people that you have and the processes and practices that your organization already has in place. So what did we look at in the solve loop? What are those steps? Or capture, structure, reuse, and improve. Now at WashU, I have certain resources that work with me. I'm very fortunate to have a large IT organization. We've got something like 700 ITIL users that are working in our system right now. And every single one of those ITIL users has the opportunity to capture knowledge articles now. They can create articles off of incidents. They can create articles from scratch. I'm also very fortunate to have a structure of knowledge coaches that are in there to make sure that the articles meet our standard structure that I've set forward. You know, everything has to have these 3 sections in it. It needs to be categorized appropriately. It needs to be done a certain way. And then, of course, we want all of our technicians and customers to be able to reuse and to improve on the information that we have there. But process integration isn't just one piece of that circle, right? It's all those different steps put together. So our little pink house is instead represented by one with many different colors on it. And what you need to think about to be successful with your knowledge is who am I asking to do this work? And how am I asking them to fit this into their lives? Because those 750 ITIL users that I have, man, their job is not to sit around and write knowledge articles. I don't have a single person in the WashU IT organization whose job is to be a technical documentation specialist. And so process integration is what gives them a reason to be part of this with me. It shows them that I care about their time, that I understand that it's valuable, and I want to make it as easy as possible for them to be part of this process. So we recently had the opportunity to update our instance of ServiceNow, and we were looking at, whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. We were looking at our various ITIL processes, and the processes that we could use to integrate knowledge into our everyday lives. Incident is probably the most common one. You're looking at break fix. That's where people are creating a lot of incidents, creating a lot of articles. And it's also where they're reusing a lot of articles. So I looked at incident. How are we doing this today and how can we be doing it better? I changed a few things to make it easier to create knowledge articles off of incidents, to make it less stress on the person who's just a technician and not a writer, not a knowledge coach. They used to have to go through all of these different steps to get things submitted. And by paying careful attention to our existing process and the existing work that these folks need to do, I made some changes to our incident integration and set it up so that the technician just has to check a box and then off it goes. Off it goes into ServiceNow, and it can be picked up by a knowledge coach later to go through and do the structure stuff and the reuse and whatnot. We made sure that reuse was easy by creating a new knowledge base that only showed drafts of information. We didn't want things to have to be bottlenecked, waiting on approvals, waiting on things to be fancy structures. And so internal only knowledge base, showing off all of those drafts so that people who are solving problems every day can get to the information, even if it's not pretty yet. They can get to it and use it. And that tells us this is good information. That tells us this is worth reuse. This is worth putting through the process of tidying it up and getting it ready to be published into the customer-facing knowledge base as well. So incident, that was a really big change. We got some excellent feedback to the changes that we made there. Problem management is another ITIL practice. Those of you who are not ITIL, you may know this by other names, but it's root cause analyses of things that are known to be wrong, known errors, if you will. So problem or known error management. And we integrate knowledge with that because our ticketing system, when you start typing in the description of what the person is saying is wrong, it brings up immediate search results from within the knowledge base to suggest, hey, you may be interested in these articles. So it makes sense to integrate knowledge with problem and our known error records with the knowledge base, because we want those to come up when a technician is starting up a new ticket so they can know, oh, hey, there's already a known error about this. I don't need to go through a bunch of steps. Somebody's already documented this the same way they would if there were actually a fix for it. So getting to the workaround records and things like that, instead of having a completely separate space for documentation of known errors and problem records and things like that, we have something that is built into the workflow that our technicians are already using. And that allows us to get reuse out of those documents, and again, to push more information forward. We can make known error records visible to our customers. Sometimes it's that there's a bug in a system and we're waiting on a vendor to fix it. And until then, all of the things that are supposed to be blue are going to be green. So if they're in the customer-facing knowledge base and they're like, oh man, all my stuff that's supposed to be blue is green, they can see there's a known error article about that in this KB. I don't need to call and complain. I don't need to call and say what's going on, because here it is already. And we do that with a separate group of people besides our regular knowledge coaches. We have problem analysts, but again, it's just who are the people that are doing the work? How can you make it fit into their process? Change management, release management, deployment management, those all actually wrap kind of nicely into user education. Anytime you are making changes to services, releasing new services, deploying new products and things like that, there's always education that goes around it. People spend a lot of time on it. It doesn't seem to matter how big or small it is. Somebody's already come up with a fact sheet or an FAQ or things like that. And we look at the knowledge base as a single source of truth for IT service information. And we need to integrate with how people are educating their users about the services that we support. And in some cases, they're already going to have their own, their website, especially for some of the bigger applications and things like that. They may have an entire awesome customer-facing thing, and that's fine too. But we want to make sure that we are being respectful of the way that people are working and sharing their information. People have come to me before and said, if I'm already keeping my team stuff in Confluence, am I supposed to also copy it into the knowledge base? And the answer is absolutely not. We don't want to duplicate this stuff. Duplicate records are how we get things wrong because somebody updates them in one place and then doesn't update them in the other. So we created things called breadcrumb articles. It's been an important part of our process integration, where we have the reference in the knowledge base. So when people are searching and they have a question about a thing, they're going to find the results that they need. The result is going to be pointing them someplace else. It's not going to be in the knowledge base, but it's going to be pointing them to the single source of truth. That's respectful of how our teams are already working. That's respectful of their process, and it still allows knowledge to be integrated into those processes with them. So that has been definitely something that I think has really improved relations between our service management office and the rest of our teams. They don't like to have somebody come in and tell them, now you need to store your information in a completely different way. And it truly doesn't always make sense. But we want to make sure that we're capturing as much as we can in the knowledge base. And if it's not actually stored in there, that at least we have an article that says, that addresses the person's needs, addresses the problem that they're trying to solve, and then points them in the right direction. So if you want to be super awesome and check out some knowledge-centered service resources, 2 websites. KCS as a methodology is quote unquote owned by the Consortium for Service Innovation, and their documentation is available at serviceinnovation.org, and there's some great stuff also at the kcsacademy.net. And unlike ITIL training and some other stuff like that, this is free. Everything that I've learned about KCS and everything that I've been able to bring to practice at WashU has been based on free resources from these folks. So they have great FAQs, they've got implementation plans, and there's all sorts of Q&As for, you know, how do I do this and what do you recommend for that? And the principles, the pillars, all of that information is free and available to folks who are interested. So that is our sort of abbreviated version of the solve and evolve loop, where we talk about the work that's being done and the team that's doing it, and how we work with that team to make sure that our process integration is respectful and helpful, and that it's truly a partnership, that it's truly an integration and not just some other work that we're slapping on top of what they're already trying to accomplish in their everyday jobs. Building that culture of trust between your knowledge team and your actual knowledge workers, your technicians, your customers, and those folks. I think that process integration is probably the #1 place where that happens. And I hope that the information that we shared today has given you some ideas of how to make that work out for you in areas like incident, problem, or known error management, change, deployment, release, and just general user education, making sure that you're trying to work in with them, work with their processes to get them to be a continual part of this solve loop. Because I tell you what, the more you get those folks who are out there doing the operational stuff, doing the actual work of using and creating knowledge every day, the more they appreciate what you're doing here, the more you're going to evolve into just a better situation overall and hit those 3 targets for improving your product, your customer experience, and your knowledge reuse. So again, this is Becky Lineberry from Washington University. If you need to contact me about anything, feel free to reach out at the email address up here, blineberry@wustl.edu. And that does it for the formal part of the presentation. If anyone has any questions, we can go to that now.
Caitlin said, great presentation. She didn't realize that the KCS learning was free. And Alan,
certification is not free, but there's an awful lot of resource in there that's free. It's fantastic.
And Alan wonders, how dependent is your KCS implementation on the incredible ITIL foundation you have in place? What if we have no ITIL at all?
If you have no ITIL, you can still use KCS methodology, okay? So think about those 4 principles that we covered when we talked about abundance. We talked about creating value and demand-driven work. Those fit really nicely with ITIL, but it's not required. KCS is sort of a value system, if you will. It values knowledge as an asset to the organization. It's something that should be shared and not hoarded. ITIL values that as well. So again, that's why it works nicely. If you're working in a very siloed organization, where we refer to the data mining as like, no, that's mine, it's a little bit harder. And that may be a mindset that you have to sell a little bit to people. But I think that it's certainly not required for ITIL. And I'll tell you what, we are not a super mature ITIL organization, as I'm finding out through this consulting process that we're going through right now with an outside firm. They're like, so on a scale of 0 to 5, you guys are like a 0.7. We're like,
A
oh
point
man, I thought we were doing really well. Yeah, we're not there
That's
yet.
pretty funny.
And yeah, it's tricky, but I think that there's certainly a lot of application in there and a lot of good reading. There are good reading about implementation specifically on those websites that I had shared there. Where'd they go? We'll go back to them.
I really loved what you said about the breadcrumbs, that you don't have to duplicate the information. That was kind of a, well, of course moment, but I think the way that you answered your colleague was fantastic. We do have another question. What kind of knowledge-based software is best to invest in? I've heard of Salesforce, ServiceNow, and is it Do it? Unsure which way to go for a university setting.
Okay. Well, for my university, we're a ServiceNow shop. I actually really like ServiceNow, and maybe I'm a little biased on that because I haven't used anything else. I think that ServiceNow is getting there in terms of knowledge integration. We recently upgraded our instance from, I guess we were about 3 instances old, and now we're on the brand spanking new one. Okay, and in that space of time, they have shown that they're really focusing on integrating knowledge records with other records. So when I talk about using the knowledge base to house known error records, that's not a thing that used to exist. And now I can connect my knowledge records with my configuration items. I can connect my knowledge records not only with incidents, but with problem tickets, with tasks, with catalog items, and all of this different stuff. And to me, that's a really cool way to make knowledge part of asset and configuration management. I mean, how cool is it when you're going to be upgrading a server if you pull up that CI and you can see every knowledge article that you have related to Windows servers?
That's pretty cool.
Like, because then you can say, oh man, I may need to make some updates to things while all of this is linked up.
Right.
So I think ServiceNow is really taking a lot of steps in the right direction. When we first started looking at this implementation, I had a whole list of customizations that I wanted to do. And then when they announced the latest upgrades and the release notes, I was like, oh, cool, you guys already took care of half of this. Good.
We have a few more questions. How does your KCS process differ between public-facing articles versus internal use articles? Are the systems or processes very different from each other for reaching those audiences?
No, the system is actually the same. There is one workflow process for getting an article published. We have 2 knowledge bases. One of them is called Incident, and we affectionately refer to it as the scratch pad. Everything that is auto-created off of an incident ticket, which means it's basically just pre-populated with all of the resolution notes and the short description of the incident, and those kind of like the garbage brain dump that you're doing as a technician when you're working this stuff. All of that populates a draft article, and that draft article goes into the incident knowledge base, and it can just sit there. It does not have to be prettied up or anything, and it's searchable by other ITIL users. And so from there, the knowledge coaches can take a look at what is being reused, because you can cite those articles. People could say, oh, this was helpful information. And then they can do the work on those articles to get them published out to the customer-facing knowledge base. They never have to go to the customer-facing knowledge base. It can just sit there being a little bit ugly, but still informative information, right?
Nice.
And it takes some of the pressure off of the approval process and gets the information into the hands of the ITIL users sooner. So that's the internal facing stuff. The customer facing stuff, once it's pushed out to that KB, we make use of a template in ServiceNow that we created. So the standard KCS template for an article is going to say that you need to state the issue, the cause, and the resolution. And that's break fix centric, right? You know, it's not about if you're doing just informational stuff. So we have this template and we put the issue, the cause, and resolution. Then we created another field called resolution ITIL view. And that's a secure field that's only visible to our ITIL users. And what that does is it, instead of having to have a customer version of the article on how to set up dual monitors and an internal version of the article on how to troubleshoot the setting up of dual monitors because the customer couldn't do it, we have one record that is about how to set up dual monitors, and the customer finds it and they can follow all the steps that they can see. And once they reach the bottom, it says, if you weren't able to accomplish this with this, you know, just call the service desk. They can open up the same article, exact one record, and they can see steps 18 through 27. The customer saw steps 1 through 17. And then,
right.
you know, so it's all in one place, and it reduces that duplicate information. So we're slimming down the number of articles that we have, but at the same time, I think streamlining the conversation that happens between the customer and the technician, because the guidance that they receive is that if you weren't able to achieve a resolution using this information, contact the service desk and refer to this KB number. And then we, at the service desk, we know, all right, you've already tried this, 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 and this. We know that you've walked through it. So that's a semi-new development for us. But the bottom line is that we want to push as much as we can to that customer-facing database, even if it's a problem that they can't solve, even if it's something where they absolutely have to call the service desk for it, because sometimes they don't know they can't solve it. I don't know about you, but I will spend 30 minutes tinkering, trying to figure something out and finally give up. And they're like, yeah, you never would have been able to do that anyway. So sometimes the issue is, you know, widget stopped appearing on screen. And sometimes the resolution box simply says, there is no self-service solution for this. You need to call the service desk, reference article number 1234. Mm-hmm. And then when the service desk technician opens that up, then they can see the ITIL view of it. I can show you what that looks like, actually, if anyone is interested. Let me get out of my screen here.
While you're navigating, Alan asked, does KCS require as much executive buy-in as ITSM, ITIL, or other projects?
I have not found that to be the case. They just sort of, the way that my stuff has been structured, they just sort of have let me say, okay, this is a proven methodology and this is what I am doing. And I'm following these steps and all of my decisions are going to be made based on this stuff. And they've kind of let me rock and roll with it. But that may not be everybody's situation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we go. Here's a great example. How to resolve invalid credentials. This is where we're saying the issue is that you're receiving this error message. And then we've got this kind of rubber stamp that we use. It requires an IT technician to resolve. Now, if I were not an ITIL user, my article would stop right here, okay? And it'll tell me what to do. I can click to open my ticket or start whatever, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then when they say, okay, go to this KB article, I can see, all right, this is what I need to do as a technician. I need to do these things, then I need to tell the user to do these things. And it's one record.
Nice.
So
do most knowledge bases sync up with ticketing systems? They do nowadays, right?
I do not know. I do not know. I wish I had some way to sort of play with some other ones, because I think that my perspective is rather limited by my own personal experience with just one system. But we've been pretty pleased with how that has worked out. The other cool thing about this that we've started doing is that every ITIL user now has the option to submit edits to articles. They're not automatically approved. They do have to go through a knowledge coach, but instead of leaving feedback or just shaking our fists at the sky and saying, no, this doesn't work, right. We've invited all of those people to buy in and be a part of this process. We talk about building trust and engagement and making it a culture of sharing information. Well, the old way that we did it you had to have a knowledge coach or knowledge manager make changes to an article, even if you're the one who wrote the article to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Once you submitted it, it was out of your hands. And I thought, man, that's just silly. It's not respecting the knowledge that our workers have. So this, by checking an article out and being able to go in and suggest the changes, then I can submit it back to the next to the knowledge coach who's in charge of that category, and they can approve my changes and publish it. So
A
again,
few more comments.
sure.
Caitlin said Quest Case KB knowledge base is terrible, so they don't use it. Alan said almost all ITSM, not just ticketing systems, have knowledge management in them, but not all are good. And then one last question. Do you use ServiceNow as a ticketing system and a knowledge base? What if the site crashes? What do you use as a backup?
It does not crash. We're
It
not
does
allowed to
not crash.
crash.
Well, that's nice. We're not allowed. It's not allowed.
No. We just traded instances a couple weeks ago. We switched over from one to another, and we were never without ticketing. I imagine if we were without ticketing, that's something that the service desk has worked out some sort of a backup plan for it. I'm not privy to that. That's not been part of my work, but I'm sure they've got something in mind if the system were to go down. So this is our ITIL user portal. This is what I get to see all the time, and we have it set up in. Let's see, if you wanted to create an incident, when you start typing in your short description, you can get your related search results in the knowledge base right away. Reporting access. And so like reporting access and support, this is a draft article. It's not done, but as a technician, I can still see it and get information. This is not a thing that we used to have. You used to have to click buttons and open separate windows and do things like that. So process integration was about streamlining this for our technicians, making it easier for them to search and reuse the knowledge. And they appreciated that change. I think there are lots of ways that we can kind of improve that culture by just talking to the people who we want to do the work, instead of saying, do this, saying, how can I help you do this? So
Lynn mentions that the University of Wisconsin's knowledge-based product is fantastic and very reasonably priced for universities. They
what is
use it
it?
at Northwestern. Was
What
it
is the
made
product?
by University of Wisconsin? Yes, it was made by them. Oh,
So I
that
think
is Do IT. Oh, it all comes together.
where's the, I can't remember the actual link here. The University of Illinois. I think it was University of Illinois. No, maybe it's not. I had somebody bookmarked someplace that had a really killer.
I used to always go to Indiana.
Yeah, so somebody had a really killer one that had a search function for both their knowledge base and their IT website.
Mm.
So one place that we are struggling a little bit right now is that we have this fantastic IT website with all of these how-to documents, because our original knowledge base purpose was that it was just going to be break fix, right?
Right.
But a lot of times people call in and they say, oh no, break fix, when really the problem is just straight up you don't know how to do it.
Sure.
So it's an education issue, it's not an incident. And so we've been in the process of moving a lot of our educational stuff into the knowledge base, because now the knowledge base is more forward facing. It's not entirely behind a firewall. But what we want to make sure that we don't do, again, is end up duplicating information. So we have knowledge articles when people want to know, how do I dot walk to related fields when I'm writing reports? Well, the video lives out here. Okay, so the knowledge article needs to point out here. It doesn't need to be a duplication of this information. So that's, again, where those sort of breadcrumbs come in.
Nice.
You're going to have multiple places where people want to see their information. And there are some folks who just don't want to go digging through a knowledge base. Well, Okay, well, what can we do for you? How do
Right.
we still keep it to a point where there's a single source of truth?
Lynn said that UW's KB is searchable by Google, so you can search
Yep,
website and the knowledge base. So,
yep. That's a pretty slick feature.
mm,
My next plan is to do the Tableau to ServiceNow API integration to try and start doing a little bit better work of measuring how we're using stuff.
mhm,
Because right now we don't. I haven't in the brand new instance, with time being a bit of a crunch lately. I haven't done an awful lot with our knowledge reports, but we do like to be able to measure how often things are being used, how often things are being viewed, what are our most popular, this and that, and the overall health of our knowledge base and the health of our incident process. How many times are people actually searching and using information? How
mhm,
many incidents are not being resolved with knowledge that could have been? So that gives us a lot of insight into where our process integrations are failing our team.
mhm.
So
Well, thank you again so much, Becky. This was really very informative and a very nice way to spend a Thursday afternoon. This recording will be available next week.
right.